I will be doing the introduction on pawn endings. Pawn endings involve only kings and pawns on one or both sides. There is nothing more logical than to learn pawn endings, as pawn endings is the most basic endgames in chess. It is why I think it will be beneficial for you to learn pawn endings. The purpose of pawn endings is to use the pawns to defend your king while also using them to win the game. In king and pawn endings, an extra pawn is decisive in more than 90% of the cases. They may be the simplest pieces compared to the others, but they do have their advantages and why there are different pawn ending techniques.
I'll explain the rules that we see on this poster shortly. The chess endgame with the king and pawn versus a king is one of the most important and fundamental endgames other than the basic checkmates. It's an important endgame for chess players to master, since most of the other endgames have a potential of reducing to this type of endgame by exchange of pieces. Players need to be able to determine quickly whether a given position is a win or draw and to know the technique for playing it, because if you make decision quickly, you can win some time as well. There are three types of pawn ending that we will talk about, and the first one will be explained by me, which is rules of square. So the rest of them will be explained by Hana. The most basic rule is when the pawn can become queen unassisted by its king. Other pawn endings may require king to help. The rule of square determines if it is possible or not. In this position, the pawn is on the fourth square from the queening square. So we include queen square as well. So in that case that we have on the poster, we have fourth. And the easy way to draw that square is we take an imaginary diagonal line to a queening square and we complete full square by finding the corner. And once we have like 4x4 square, and now we move to the second step. And if the black king can move into this square, he can catch the pawn. Otherwise, the pawn wins the race and goes for promotion, which gives huge advantage to a player.
So another important part of pawn ending is opposition. Opposition simply means that you are taking away the advanced squares of your opponent's king, in this case black. By positioning the white king on c5, white has taken away these three squares b6, c6 and d6 from the black king, so it means that the black king cannot advance into these three squares. It can only move to its left or its right. The white king will just follow, and if the black king backs up, it's the same, the white will just follow. It's like a mimicking game between the two kings. Now the opposition here is having a single pawn and its king on the board. The kings are now face to face and the white king must protect its pawn. The game will either end with a stalemate or the black king will get the pawn. So next is about T-squares, where it's such that if a king's player occupies it, the player can force the pawn to promote regardless of where the king is or whose side it is to move or against any defense. So here on the board, white controls the promotion of e8 from f7. White can always choose to push the pawn, so f7 is considered as a key square for the king and the pawn. In fact, all the squares highlighted here are the key squares for the king and the e6 pawn versus the black king. So white cannot allow black to take the pawn or it will lose. And it also must make sure that the black cannot enter the key squares. So that's all, and I will move on to the next part.
I'll be explaining about the advantages and disadvantages of pawn ending. So in pawn ending, the passed pawn is a very important tool. So the passed pawn is a pawn that advances beyond all the enemy pawn. In other words, a passed pawn has no enemy pawn in front of it or adjacent pawns that can stop it from being promoted. This can prove to be very advantageous in pawn ending if only pawns are left in the board and all the other pieces are locked. Passed pawns are important because they can be promoted to another piece. If a white pawn reaches the 8th rank, or if a black pawn reaches the 1st rank, then that pawn can be promoted to a knight, bishop, rook or a queen. So in the endgame, passed pawns are especially dangerous because there are fewer pieces that can try to stop them. In the following diagram, we can see the passed pawn that cannot be stopped from being promoted, which is the white pawn. This is some of the advantages of the pawn ending. Okay, so for the disadvantages, of pawn ending is that sometimes the king can be isolated with the pawn moving forward, and this is why the king and king is very important in pawn endings. Next will be the pawn islands. During the pawn ending, we need to have as less pawn islands as possible. Pawn islands are referred to pawns that are separated by one or more columns. Pawn islands are considered to be weaknesses. The player with more pawn islands have a weaker structure. Players deploying the pawn ending should reduce their pawn islands and strengthen the structure. So as you can see here, the white has a weaker structure as they have more pawn islands, while the black has a stronger structure as they have less pawn islands. Okay, that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, for the techniques of pawn ending, so it have 3 techniques, which is the first one is rule of square, second one is opposition, and the third one is key square. So for the first one is the rule of square, which is it is used to determine whether or not a passed pawn can be queen where it is not supported by its own king and the opponent's king is chasing it. And second one is the opposition, where it is used by the king to secure a path for the pawn to be promoted by facing the opponent's king. And the third one is the key square. It is a square such that if a player's king can occupy it, where he or she can force some gain.
Thank you, Farah, for the presentation earlier. Now I will be presenting to you the rules of square for ending. So what we have here is a board of chess that I have laid out from chess.org to show to you the rules of square techniques. So as you can see here, I have set up a white to play, so white to move first lah. So as you can see here, we have a condition where we want to exchange our queen, and also because the pawn have a chance to promote itself to queen back. So as you can see here, we go to the first move, and also the king is in check, so the king have to take their queen. So the king already take, and we have a chance to move our pawn to promote. So we put it there, and also the pawn will have to take the to reposition. And now we have a rules of square implied here techniques. So as you can see here, we have 3 by 3 of rules of square from the pawn and also the king from enemy side, which is the black one. So from here we have e7. So the king have moved to e7 because the king want to take their pawn and before it get to promote itself. So however, as you can see here, the king is actually does not have time to take the pawn. So what we have here is actually the king have positioned itself to be much more vulnerable to the enemy. So as you can see here, that is the rules of square that have been implied, which is from here. This is the rules of square 3 by 3. This because 3 by 3 is because we have 2 steps. However, the king have 3 steps to take the pawn. So it is actually a useful techniques to imply in the real chess, because we can see that the enemy have no chance to take our pawn. Thank you.
Today I'll be demonstrating on king and pawn endings, which is called the opposition. So this is the current board, and I'll be playing on the white side, so it is my turn to move. First, you have to step in your king in front of our pawn, in front of my pawn, to make sure that this pawn will not be taken. So step in the king in front of the pawn, and then the opponent will move here, or maybe here, or maybe like anywhere he can go. And then we step in to the opposite of the king, opponent's king, to make sure that we leave 3 spaces here. And then the opponent will play it more safe. So let's say if you against a high tier player, he will go here because it is the same path of our pawn and the same files as well of our pawn, so it is easy to get a stalemate. And then we do not easily go here. Okay, we must play it opposite. It's called opposition. So we move our pawn we move our king in front of the opponent's king to make sure that the pawn is safe to go here. And then the opponent's king must move left or right. So let's say the opponent's king move to the left, and then our king, we have to move our king to same as the first step, which is the opposite of the opponent's king. And then we can see that the pawn is free to move in the straight path. So there's only 3 moves that the opponent's king can move. So let's say he moves here, and then we can move our pawn easily. So there's the turning point here. The opponent's king cannot take the pawn right here because it is too late, because we already counted with the 3 steps, I mean the 3 moves, which is the opponent's, which is in front of the opponent's and opposition. And then the opponent's king will play back, and then we go straight, and then the opponent's king has two more moves. Okay, and then we can just freely go take the promotion, and then we take the promotion. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Next, I will do the demonstration on key square. On this chessboard, we can see that we got the white king, white pawn, and the black king. This demonstration is done by using the Lichess web. So we can start the demonstration now. Okay, so we can see that the white king is moved from d2 to e3, and from e3 to d4. And we will keep repeating the steps to make sure the white king have the more spaces for this E column for the white pawn to move to the opposite side and change, become queen. So in this case, we can move the white pawn to in front. Next, we need to move this white pawn to in front first, because if we move this white king to in front, this white pawn is not in the key square of the white king, and the black king is able to attack the white pawn. So we need to move the white pawn first and make sure the white pawn is in the key square of the white king. So next, we need to make sure we got the more spaces for this white pawn to move to the opposite side and become the queen. Okay, so in this case, we can see that the key square of the white king has the white pawn, and the black king cannot attack the white pawn, and the white pawn can keep moving to the opposite side and change to white queen. Okay, yeah, this is the way for the key square techniques. Thanks for watching our chess teaching video, and hope you can gain some knowledge about pawn ending through this video. Thank you.